Okay, okay, perfect, man, perfect. Well, tell me a little bit about your, go in depth in terms of your background, your
Yeah,
marketing agency and everything else that you've tapped into. I know you were even in the beverage or cooking space or something like that as well. So, which is very interesting to me. I love cooking. I love all things food. So, I'd love to tap into all of that and how you came about into marketing and all that good stuff.
sure. Yeah, I'll go back a little bit more because I know sometimes when you tell your story, you kind of talk about your origin and your family and stuff. So maybe I'll
Yeah,
kind of touch a little bit on that. But
please, please.
um, so my dad used to tell me this interesting story about my grandfather. My family's from East Africa and North Africa. And so my grandfather came from India to East Africa to build a railroad, and he was illiterate. He couldn't read or he couldn't write. But eventually, somewhere down the line, he made a little bit of money. And my dad always tells this story about how the first thing my grandfather spent his money on was a newspaper subscription, and he taught himself to read from that. And I found that really, really interesting years later down the road because I realized that one of the things that my parents always taught me and they instilled in me was the ability to learn. And how do you learn? How do you absorb knowledge? The value of reading and kind of being a lifelong student. I really appreciate and tip my hat to my parents for that. They instilled the importance of that in me, and to this day, I see that value. It's really interesting how that kind of pops up later. But ironically, no one in my family growing up, apart from a couple uncles here and there, was an entrepreneur. And so I always found that interesting. And I never knew that entrepreneurship could be a career. No one really highlighted that to me. I thought I don't know why. I just never really realized you could
Right.
you could come up with an idea, take it from concept to reality, and commercialize it. For me, it was
Yeah.
always coming from an immigrant background, and I'm sure you have the same as like engineer, scientist, doctor, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But what I've come to realize now, looking back and thinking of things, was that everyone in my family had an entrepreneurial mindset, and that's something that I've really come to terms with now, post kind of being a founder and selling my company and exiting another. Was that, and I struggled with this for a little bit, is that you don't have to, in order to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to be on the cap sheet. You don't have to be the CEO. You can still be entrepreneurial, and I think in this decade, prompted by Shopify and all this stuff that's going on, it's never been more true that you can be
Right.
entrepreneur. You can have an entrepreneurial mindset, and you can take an entrepreneurial and creative approach to problem solving. And I recognize that everyone in my family has always taken that. And in later stages in life, they've sometimes become entrepreneurs now, than their second career or in their retirement careers and whatnot. And I kind of had a similar story. So originally I was an environmental scientist, so I went the science route. So kind of,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So self-fulfilling prophecy, went the science route. And I always loved science. To this day, I love science. And I didn't go the doctor route. I became an environmental scientist. I kind of specialized in sustainable tech, so I've always had a tech angle. My dad was always very keen on tech, which was very fortunate that we were able to kind of fool around with gadgets and things. But the interesting thing about that stage of my life was I was an environmental scientist. I had a purpose, so saving the environment, promoting sustainability, and through happenstance, somewhere down the line of being an environmental scientist, I worked in the government, I worked in the private sector, and I worked in NGOs. And the reason I did that kind of hits on something that you posted the other day about asking questions and staying curious.
Yeah.
Well, I figured, I don't know if I want to be in the government. I don't know if I want to be in private sector. And Ottawa in Canada is a particularly government-driven city. Almost 2 in 4 people work in the government. So
Wow.
it's if you're being a scientist, normally they tell you in university you're going to med school, you're going to be a researcher in the university, or you're going to the government. And
Okay.
so to me, that sounded a little bit crazy because the government kind of sounded like it sucked. Like you're in this dusty old library, and I had summer jobs and working
Yeah.
in the insect lab and things like that, and it's a little bit antiquated and it didn't have that drive and excitement. So I'm like, no, this can't be the answer. And so I wanted to stay curious, kind of as your quote said. And so kind of jumped around in the different sectors and tried them all out. And somewhere down the line, I ended up really taking a love to marketing and the tech side
Okay.
and the side of science communications, which I'm still kind of involved in today. And so that's kind of how I got involved in marketing. So I was in kind of science communications and marketing and education and the digital side. And eventually I had a friend that came to me one day and he goes, I'm opening a taco restaurant. Would you like to just do the marketing for it? And he goes, I know you don't really do this, but you've taken the summer. I'd taken a bit of a summer off, 3 4 months. And he goes, I'll give you free tequila and tacos for life. That was the deal.
No
And
better, no better bargain than that, dude.
yeah, and boy did I regret that deal, and boy did he regret that deal because it ended up taking a lot of my time, and I was eating every meal over there and smashing tequilas over the summer. But what I did recognize was that I loved solving problems, and that kind of comes from science as well a little bit. And I love
Right.
having that answer and then question and answer. And I guess that's the entrepreneurial mindset as well. And so I realized there's all these small business owners out there that don't understand at the time social media, which was super new, and they don't know
Yeah.
how to gather content. They don't know how to put it out there. What if I create that service and build a team of people that come into your business for X amount of hours a week, and you pay a monthly retainer fee, which is a super common model now, but at the time we were the first one in town to do it. And I'll just scale out like that. Every restaurant could, pay $300-400 a month. And so next thing I know, fast forward 2-3 years later, I had a full-fledged restaurant marketing agency, and we took on some other clients, but it was primarily the food business, and that's how I got involved in some food businesses and e-commerce and whatnot. And so that grew, and I think our plateau at was like maybe 15 to 30 clients, somewhere in there, and it was a really small team, mostly contractor based, and myself. And so recognizing that I need to scale up, I said, okay, well, I have two choices. I can either invest capital, which I don't really have right now because my margins are they're very similar to the restaurant industry, actually, 30% margins.
Right.
Seems like every business is like that.
Yeah.
But that was, not couldn't do too much long term planning based on that. And I think I was probably somewhere between 25 and 28 at the time. So I sold half the agency to this other web marketing firm that had been around for a long time. And so they had a couple things that I didn't have. Well, one, they had accounting, they had admin, they had the reputation, they'd been around for a long time, and they had website services. I knew how to do website stuff, but I really didn't enjoy doing it because when you're doing the marketing, you're out there in meetings and stuff every day. You don't really have time to sit down at a terminal and build a website. And I didn't like the idea of handing it over to anyone because they don't understand the brand and whatever. That's a whole other rant. Right. So I partnered with this company, and we worked together for about 3 years. We grew quite strongly, from about 4 people to about 15. And now we have this website side of things. And then COVID hit. And luckily before COVID, my business partner had the foresight to say we need to diversify a little bit for multiple reasons. Restaurant clients are kind of a bit of a pain sometimes on the payment side.
Yeah.
And he just loved bigger corporate clients. He was a very corporate guy. And so we made that pivot, and it was really luckily in time because it was right before COVID. And so we still retained about 30% of our restaurant clients, but we diversified out. So we did a lot of property management stuff, and property management was and construction companies, which was booming. And we did some tech stuff as well for some bigger cybersecurity companies, which was also booming. So we were able to weather the pandemic really well. No one got laid off. Everything was, business as usual. But again, I started to think about, okay, how do we reach that next step and how do we do that growth? So originally, when I'd been looking around at companies to partner with, there was another guy who put an offer on the table. It was a younger gentleman, and his company was called Web Marketers, and he only did websites. He did some Google Ads stuff as well, which we didn't really do. So called him up, and we ended up selling again half the company to him, and now we became 4 partners, a larger agency specializing in paid Google, website design, backed by SEO data, or SEO practices, best practices, and the social media side. And we were the leading one of the leading social media agencies in town. They were one of the leading web marketing agencies in town. So it was a really good kind of marriage. And so that's kind of how I weathered COVID. But, as some things kind of happen here, and let me kind of revert to my notes here. Well, I'll touch on a couple things. So one thing was I really liked food marketing because it had a really frequent buying cycle. People eat 3 times a day. And so pulling from that science side of my brain, you like to run experiments and kind of learn. And so that stuff kind of got lost now because we weren't able to do that. And so getting my hands dirty wasn't something I got to do as much anymore. You're a bigger company, you're kind of doing HR, and you're kind of worrying about, different things. And it's really easy to get caught up as you grow it. And there's 3 kind of things that I, where did I have it here? Oh yeah, here we go. So 3 kind of growth traps that I noticed. This is kind of from my own kind of learnings, and I'm sure you can familiarize with it. Maybe we can chat about it too. One was like burnout. I was burning out. I had, like you said, I started a ghost kitchen as well, and I had a snack delivery company, and I had this marketing company that I'm, managing partner for, creative director. And so burning out for sure. Delegation becomes a little bit more chaotic because the staff also doesn't know when you have multiple partners who's leading things. I had a partner that would kind of zoom in for a day a week, completely kind of dust off the whiteboard, and now we're like starting at ground zero, and right. the team's kind of confused. And then there's that imposter syndrome as well. How did I get here? Because I kind of got there through serendipity. I didn't do an MBA. I had a science background. I never had a marketing background or a business background. So do I deserve to be here? Why am I making these choices? Are they the right choices? They appear to be, but who knows? Yeah. Did you ever kind of have that, I guess, you kind of challenge yourself?
Yeah, I mean, dude, I think it's weird if you don't have it. Actually, I think I'd flip that around and say if you don't have that, I think sometimes it's really really good to come to a place where you don't know how you got there, just
Hmm.
knowing that I didn't put that. People feel like, so one of the big things that kind of like write about and preach about when it comes to entrepreneurship is like everybody wants to overplan. Everyone
Yeah.
wants to, I want to plan to get here, and then when I get there, I'm going to plan the next thing. I want to plan. I want to plan. I'm going to plan. I have a very big problem with that. And partially it's because of my personality, and partially it's because I just don't feel like you can plan for the unknown. You can sit here. My friend has this saying that he told me a long time ago, and that I use all the time. It's like expectations are just resentments waiting to happen,
Hmm.
because
Interesting.
what you end up hoping is going to happen, even if it's off a little bit, you're going to be mostly disappointed, because you're going to be like, that didn't happen the way I expected it to happen. So if you actually want things to happen, you just actually have to do them. And then when you do them, you get to another like point B at that point. And then at point B, you say, okay, what's the next thing I need to do? And what do I need to fix on point B now that I'm here? You can
Hmm.
only really, in entrepreneurship, in my opinion, you can only fix things when you actually experience them, because you don't know whether you're selling product or you're
Yeah.
selling a service or whatever else it is. You may have the biggest and best pitch and you can close 99% of your clients, but whatever that is, you're never going to be 100%. That's just bottom line, no matter how fucking good you are, right? So to me, it's like, yeah, you're going to come in with imposter syndrome. You're going to be like, how did I get here? Why are these people even listening to me? Like, I don't even know half the shit that we're doing. I just put the right people in the right place and let's get it rolling, like that sort of thing. So absolutely, man. I think that's a crucial learning curve. I don't even look at it as a pain point. I think that's actually a learning curve that you take with you, and you understand, like, sometimes I'm just going to get to places and I don't know how. It's like taking a wrong turn somewhere on the street and you're like, whoa, this is a nice neighborhood. How did I get here? Same thing
Yeah.
with entrepreneurship.
That's interesting that you bring that up, and I think one thing that you've done a great job on, or that you do a great job on, I've noticed, is you put out a goal and you plan out your methodology on how to get there, and then you map out your next steps. And I like how you build that in public as well. You don't build that in secret. I think that's really admirable, and I think as entrepreneurs, I think we kind of have our little group on Twitter. I noticed that all of us are kind of building in public a little bit, but it's not that
Yeah,
prominent normally in tech. I would say particularly in like old school tech, big tech, let's
right.
call it. But I really can appreciate that, and that's why I love Twitter, because you find that little group, and like I said, I think we found a little group here that we're all kind of challenging each other, asking each other questions, and I've never noticed anyone's hesitation to kind of answer anything
Yeah,
from their own
yeah.
experience, and that's important, I think, in the learning.
You have to my saying is, you have to be okay with being wrong when you're having conversations, because then you're not going to learn anything, right?
Yeah,
Like, you got to be willing to share and be like, oh, like, for example, one of my big goals this year is, dude, I've been running businesses for a really long time, helping other people, consulting, doing all these other things. Copywriting and email marketing is something I never looked towards. Like, I just was like, dude, somebody else fucking deal with that shit. I don't want to
yeah.
deal with it ever, like ever, because I wasn't good at it. It's not my forte. It's not my thing. But now I leaned into a lot more writing every single day, like literally every single day. And now I'm like, oh my God, I cannot wait to go and write those pieces, go do the landing page, go do the emails, go do all of this stuff. So you end up finding yourself kind of weaving through different
Hmm.
aspects of, like you said, entrepreneurship mindset. Like, I don't want to have to do everything. I want the right people to do it. But if I'm interested in something, you just got to lean into it. You just got to go in and say, I'm going to give this a shot.